AI is a lot like fire. Fire can cook our food for us and keep us warm and light our way, but it can also burn down buildings and hurt people.
Matt really has boots in the ground in US schools, and he has this idea of the AI hype curve or the adoption curve. Welcome to Toddle's School Leaders Project. On today's episode of the podcast, we talk to Matt Miller, author of AI for Educators. And this was just such a delightful conversation. He really has insights into what it looks like to get teachers past the trough of despair. So we've all been in excitement. We're down in the trough of despair. How do we get out of that and move forward towards really utilizing AI in ways that makes work meaningful and practical? You're not going to miss a single second of this episode, so let's jump right in. Matt Miller, I am so excited to have you here on the School Leaders Project. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Cindy. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. So I'd love for you to kind of set the stage for our audience. Like, what's your kind of learning journey, your story? What are you passionate about? What brings you here?
I was a high school Spanish teacher for more than 10 years, taught all levels of high school Spanish in a little bitty rural school in West Central Indiana, graduating class of 32 kids, like little bitty school. Like we have a drive your tractor to school day. Like you're starting to get a picture, right? So taught for more than 10 years after studying journalism in college. I was actually a journalism major, thought that I was going to be a newspaper reporter my whole life, and tried it out and hated it and went back to school so that I could be a teacher. And then, since then, I wrote a book called Ditch That Textbook, and started talking to teachers about that at schools and school districts and conferences and stuff. And really for the better part of the last 8 years, that's sort of been my passion, is trying to create resources and help teachers solve problems and, provide some practical things that they can do in the classroom to help them save time and teach well and everything. And so, since then I've written a grand total of 6 books, and this, I know, right? It's like, that was definitely something that I didn't have on my bingo card for my life, but it worked out that way. And so here I am.
Do you have a favorite one of your books you've written?
Are you trying to ask me to pick between my books like someone would have to pick between their children?
I know, it's such a cruel question to even start with.
It really is. Yeah. So I'll go with you on that and say that, my most recent book, AI for Educators, has that's probably been the most successful book that I've written. And I feel like it came out at a time when everyone was trying to just wrap their brains around, what AI is and what it means in the classroom. We're still wrapping our brains around it. So it's probably either that one or my book, Tech Like a Pirate, which was the techie follow-up to Dave Burgess's book, Teach Like a Pirate, which is all about, memorable learning in class and stuff. And so I provided lots of good techie ideas to engage students. And those are probably my 2 favorites. I can't go down to one, but at least those are my 2 favorites.
I'll take it. Well, and I told you this before we press record, but I was at a conference, the Georgia Independent Schools Association, and your name came up, and everybody in the room, like their eyes lit up, and a book started getting passed around. And so this one is probably the most hype I've heard about an AI for teaching book. So let's get into AI a little bit.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You're in schools a lot now. You're consulting a lot. You're working with AI. I'd love to hear about the exciting things that you're seeing. Like in the past couple of weeks, past couple of months, what are some things that you're seeing happening in schools that you're just like, what? This is so cool. This episode is brought to you by Toddle, your all-in-one AI-powered learning management system for K-12 schools. If you're trying to play with AI and feeling a little bit stuck in lesson planning, or really just how to give it that language that you need to take your practice to the next level, it's worth playing around with Toddle AI. Book yourself a free demo and play with it at toddleapp.com.
Yeah. I think, obviously there's the side of it of efficiency, right? And I mean, at first you look at that and that's not like the sexy, amazing, cool, transformative stuff and everything. But if you think about it, for the longest time, we've been talking as teachers about the trouble that we have with keeping up with everything. That's like the big barrier. Anytime I talk to teachers and, ask them about what it is that's keeping them from doing the kind of work that they're excited about doing, and the answer is always time. And so, if we get this opportunity to, shave a few minutes off here and shave a few minutes off there, and it starts to add up, like time is the currency that we use in the classroom to do great things. And so if we're giving more of that currency into the hands of teachers, I think that's super exciting. So I think that's probably one of them. And then the other thing that I'm getting more and more excited about is seeing the ways that AI can be used, especially in the hands of students, to elevate their level of thinking. I think there's this misconception out there that says that a lot of these AI tools are just going to make us stupid and they're going to, do the work for us and they're going to do all the students' homework and essays and everything. And you can certainly use it for that. You can, but there are some companies that are making some products and then teachers who are using a variety of products to boost critical thinking, to boost creativity, to get students, basically to make students smarter, to make them better thinkers in the end. And I think that's the big thing. AI is a lot like, it's a tool like fire. Fire can cook our food for us and keep us warm and light our way, but it can also burn down buildings and hurt people. It just depends on how you're using it. And I think AI is a lot like that. It can be used for good or used for bad. And we've just got to identify what the good uses are and, try to put those far and wide, I think.
There's so much I love about what you said. I love the fire metaphor, especially. So I guess that leads me to that next question of what's the difference in classrooms where you see AI being used as, progress and innovation and critical thinking versus when it's just being used as kind of a, I don't know, cheating mechanism or something. Is it a cultural difference? Is it how we're teaching it differently? Like what's the difference maker there?
To me, it's how it's being implemented. It's how it's being used. It's like when we're using it for enhancement or when we're using it for replacement. So I think that's the key to me anyway, right? Because we immediately probably thought when ChatGPT came out, we immediately thought about the replacement side of it. Oh my goodness, it's going to replace student thinking. It's going to replace student writing and the ability for students to develop skills and everything. And it's going to replace all of that stuff. And it's, kids are going to be stupid and adults are going to be stupid and the world's going to be stupid. And, you hear all of that stuff. But when you see it on the enhancement side, to me, that's the incredible part. That's where, an AI assistant becomes a thinking partner that asks you questions that you wouldn't expect, or that gives you big picture ideas that you can go iterate on yourself, or provides you feedback that you might not consider otherwise. And when we start to do that, it becomes like an augmentation of the human experience, which honestly isn't all that weird because we've been getting augmentations of the human experience for the longest time. Google search is an augmentation that makes us, adds to our human abilities. And there are lots of, creative tools and, things like that add, it kind of like uplift what we're able to do ourselves. And I would even throw accessibility in that too, the ability to level the playing field for so many students too. So I think all of that to me fits into that enhancement bucket.
Well, I like to liken it to GPS. Have we potentially lost something? Our ability to navigate, our ability to know directionality, potentially, but just the access that it gives us that when we're able to direct to places when we have a GPS, it just, to me, the juice is worth the squeeze. The things that potentially are lost are almost worth it when we increase that capacity. Do you think that's a good metaphor or not really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, immediately that makes me think, as somebody who's sort of directionally challenged, I even plug the destination into my GPS to places that I know I'm supposed to go. Like I kind of know the way because I want to know how long it's going to take. And I want to see if there's any like detours I should take. And sometimes I kind of forget and I just need to glance and everything. And I mean, it's like we were saying earlier, it augments the experience. It's not that I couldn't find that place. But another side of it too, that I think is a good connection to how we use AI in our daily lives is how do we want to use our attention? Because if you think about it with GPS, I could take the time to pull out the paper map and look and use my magnifying glass and try to figure out, is that a road or is that a line that I drew on it or something? And try to figure out those directions, and it might take forever, or do I just plug it into the GPS and use my attention for something else, so
That I think is the ultimate question that we'll need to be able to answer in the future is what work is worth my cognitive load? And some things are like, and potentially getting out that map and drawing that route is worth your cognitive load. And that's what you're learning about right now. But at other times it's not. And it's intentionally choosing which work we're offloading and which work we're doing for ourselves.
yeah, it's so true. And
Mm.
I think as teachers, we're having a hard time with that, because it's not just us that's doing that, it's students that are doing that too. They're making those judgment calls on how they should use their time and attention. And see, anymore, if a teacher gives a student an assignment and they don't see the relevance in it, and they don't see, why should I spend 45 minutes, let's say, of my uninterrupted cognitive load on trying to complete this task and trying to do it to the best of my ability, when I could use something else to get it done, and then I could spend my time on what matters most. And honestly, if you want to look at it this way, it's probably good that students are thinking that way in a way, because that's a real world skill, is trying to figure out how not to waste your time and how to spend your human faculties in a really smart way. The problem with it from the teacher side is that sometimes they don't see what's worth spending the attention on the same way that we do. And so I think we've got to get super, super, super clear and transparent and relevant about why we ask students to do certain things, so that they understand the why, and make sure that we're all aligned and we're all pushing in the same direction. And it's not easy, and that may be a little utopian of me to think about, but I kind of think like that's the direction we've got to go.
Well, I think you hit it spot on that. I mean, the Stanford study show us that kids are cheating the same amount. Like introducing AI didn't change the amount that students were cheating. What has a marked difference on students who cheat and when they don't cheat is if they feel a sense of belonging and if they feel that the work is meaningful and valuable.
Yep.
And so I think AI more than ever just shifts the onus on us to say, what do you care about learning? And how is what we're doing in the classroom connected to your goals as a human being? And if we're not having these conversations, they're going to use AI, and they should.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And don't you feel like also when you said, does this fit what you're trying to do and what your goals are and everything? Don't you kind of feel like when we peer into the future and we look at how AI could impact education, that's a good shift that could come out of all of this? This is something that we teachers have been trying to do forever. We've been trying to, personalize learning as best as we can. And we're trying to differentiate instruction. And we try to get to know our students and try to make it just right from them. And yet we're still stuck in an education model where you put 24 kids in the same room with one teacher and you don't give them enough time to do what they really, really need to do. And so now it just feels to me like it's going to scale our ability to deliver the kind of education that each individual student needs. It's going to give us much more of the ability to do that than we've ever had, probably in the history of education.
Preach, Matt. You and I can be buddies. So I love thinking about the fact that you wrote a book about AI, which is so cool, but also a book is a pretty slow medium, right? Creating, publishing a book. Yeah. I'm curious, between when you've written the book and now, what are some of the lessons that you learned? If you could add another chapter to your book now, just add it in there, what might it be?
Oh gosh, there's so many different directions that this could go. When I wrote the book, I was very careful not to focus it too much on the tools that were available, because that would go out of date very quickly. Right. But I think and I tried to focus on this somewhat, but I'd like to put even more emphasis on it. I would like to think more about how we equip students for this future where AI is going to be a very real, very big part of their work and their everyday lives. What do we do to get students ready for the future in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or even further out? And I think that if we kind of take the easy way out, I think some folks are just saying, well, just use AI. have them use AI, and then they'll learn about AI. And I'm like, I don't think, I think that's like nuanced like a sledgehammer. That's just a little, that doesn't work for me, because, our AI tools can sometimes remove some of the desirable difficulties that we want students to have. It can stand in the way of some of the stuff that they need to wrestle with to get, to be able to think and to be able to develop skills. And so I think just, flat out saying use AI to learn AI doesn't work, in part also because today's AI is the most rudimentary version of artificial intelligence that our students will work with, as they continue to go forward. And I think if we're trying to prepare students for the technology that they will face in the future, it's kind of like, taking floppy disks and trying to prepare us for the internet age. It's just, right. We can't even fathom it. But I think there are some things that we can do to prepare students for that future. Like, for instance, problem solving and critical thinking is still huge. Even though we can ask for help and for backup from the artificial intelligence, we're still going to need to think. We're still going to need to decide what we're going to do with what AI gives us and how we go about our day-to-day lives and our interpersonal communication and our relationships and everything. Like, I think another thing that we can do too is that we can prepare students to be nimble and agile to adapt to whatever comes to them. Because, right. Let's be honest, the technology is already changing really, really fast right now, and it's probably not going to slow down. And so if that's the case, jobs are going to change. The nature of work that we do is going to change. If you read some of the big AI thinkers, they're even saying that our concept of work and how we spend our time is going to change. If a lot of tasks become, done more efficiently, and we might even spend less time on work. And so then we've got to really adapt. Anyway, you got me on a little bit of a soapbox here, but I think the big thing is like, I think the big thing is that there are all of these skills that I want to prepare students with today to prepare them for that future. And if people are like, we got to use AI for kids to be ready for AI, that's too superficial for me.
Some language I want to really call out from what you just said. I think the through line for me there was just this concept of intentional curriculum.
Yeah.
Of being clear on explicitly teaching knowledge, understanding, and skills connected to AI. And more broadly than that, teaching transferable skills. Because like you said, if we're focusing on how to use ChatGPT 4.0, just like if you wrote that in your book, that would have gone out of date for teachers. If we're teaching our students that, it's silly, it's short-sighted. So what are those larger zooming out transferable skills? And sites like the World Economic Forum and Future of Jobs reports can give us some clarity into what those skills might be. Mm-hmm. The other piece I really want to talk about is this idea of desirable difficulty, which is a phrase I'm going to steal from you forever. Thank you.
Well, I've got to say real quick, I stole it too. I think I saw it out of the book Make It Stick. And then I think they borrowed that from another research study that came out before that. So I think lots of us have been borrowing that phrase. So go ahead and borrow away.
I adore it. And I wonder, this is a metaphor I've been using, and I would love it if you stole it, is with students. Have you seen the report from Hattie and Dylan William and Aaron Hamilton? They came out with this like cool chart that showed that like when experts use AI, it increases their capacity. But when novices use AI, it decreases their capacity over time, which I thought was just a really interesting chart. And so the metaphor I'm using when working with students is this idea of AI as apprentice. So as a novice, like you're only going to assign to AI things you've already mastered. And that if you're asking AI to do things for you that you can't yet do for yourself, then that's where you're going to run into sticky situations because you're not learning and growing. You can't correct the AI. And it's just kind of this vicious cycle of staying novice. So that's a metaphor I really like. Have you heard that one before? Do you have a different one that you're using with students?
No, that makes an awful lot of sense. I've been reading a lot from Ethan Mollick recently. Ethan
Mm.
Malik is a professor he's like an entrepreneurship professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. He wrote a book called, actually, I've got it like right here by me, called Co-Intelligence, which is
Yeah,
a book
okay.
that I was just reading this on the plane on the way back from a workshop. And one of the things I remember him saying is that that AI can push, and of course the capacity of AI and the intelligence of it will continue to grow, but that AI will be able to push us to do like average or above average work
Mm.
for a lot of different areas. Like
Right.
one of the ones that he focused on was like in law. It can help you to be sort of an average or above average lawyer.
Because so much of that is memorization.
Yes, yes. But as far as getting to those higher levels, like at expert level, that it's just not there yet. So to me, that kind of fits in with what you were trying to say a moment ago, that if we can develop, way above average faculties on something, then, our humanity is still important. We don't become obsolete. And
Mm.
so, but if you're not quite there yet, if there are things that I'm not great at and I use AI to help improve me to like average or above average capacity, then it all comes down to how do you want to use the tool, do you want to use it to do something that you need to just get done and then you get it done at an average level, or do you want to use it to push you to higher and higher levels, right?
So cool. Yeah, they liken it to, they call it like riding the machine. And if you think of an expert riding a machine, you get to new plateaus and new horizons versus a novice who's just like holding on for dear life and just kind of getting there. Oh, that's really cool. You made me think about that differently. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, let's get into your hype curve because I adore it. And
Yeah.
I just think it's really cool because it's one of those concepts that, I mean, I don't think the idea of an adoption curve is a super like brand new concept for anybody, but the way that you've articulated it and the one that you based it off the hype curve, I think is
Right.
so super duper helpful. So can you speak to it a little bit, like your hype curve, the idea for it and how you modified it?
Uh-huh. Yes, absolutely. So mine was based off of this thing called the Gartner hype cycle. And so, the Gartner hype cycle talks about when a new technology comes to market, sort of like what's the amount of, it's got the visibility on the y-axis and then time on the x-axis. And so how visible, like how much are people talking about it? And so it basically, if you look at the Gartner hype cycle, it looks like a roller coaster, straight up, way down, back up again. And all of this AI stuff kind of feels like a roller coaster. So it's kind of fitting.
Right.
But basically what it says is, in a nutshell, it says that as soon as a technology comes out, there's a spike in the visibility in a short amount of time to what they call, and I love some of the terms that they use on this hype cycle. They call it the peak of inflated expectations, which I feel
Utopian.
like
We're
is
never going
so,
to work again. It's going to be
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We start to see the possibilities in theory, but practice hasn't caught up. And then as soon as we start trying to really, really use it, and we realize that it's early technology and it's buggy and it's incomplete and everything, that peak falls off to what they call the trough of disillusionment. Aren't these names
So
fantastic?
dramatic.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
trough of disillusionment.
Yeah, I think of the biblical valley of the shadow of death whenever I
Yeah.
hear the trough of disillusionment. And so it comes down to there, and it sort of starts to bottom out somewhat with, so a lot of people are like, nope, it's not ready. Nope, it's never going to work. Nope, this is terrible. And so lots of people abandon ship, but then you get some of those like core users who are willing to ride it out and figure it out and everything. And so once they start to figure that out, it starts to normalize a little bit and it comes up on what it calls the slope of enlightenment. We're becoming enlightened to how it can be used and how it can be applied. And then it finally flattens out at what they call the plateau of productivity. The plateau of productivity is where it becomes kind of mainstream. Not everybody's using it, but a lot of people are using it. And we figured out how it fits into our day-to-day lives. So
Cool.
I've noticed the Gartner hype cycle before. And when we started looking at AI, I started thinking, yep, this this is going to be the way that it looks in schools.
Right.
And to some extent, I feel like it already has. We got the peak of inflated expectations where everybody was talking about it and everybody was saying, oh, it's going to make teachers obsolete. Oh, kids are never going to have to do anything. Oh, it's going to make this job go away and it's going to add this new. And everybody had all of these prognostications. And then we started trying to use Chat GPT like 3.5, and it kept making mistakes, or it wasn't doing everything that we wanted it to and everything. And then people are like, look how stupid AI is. It doesn't even know that 2 + 2 is 4. If I said I have 3 bananas and 2 apples, how many pieces of fruit do I have? And it tried to say 6. There was like all of those stories,
Right.
And so then, people were real frustrated with it and everything. But, and especially in schools, it was that way too. You'd have people that would say, oh, the hallucinations, it makes so many mistakes that I can't ever trust it to do anything. Well, part of that was that we weren't thinking about what large language models were actually made to do, and we were trying to use it to do different things than it was made to do. So we get into this trough of disillusionment, and where we are right now in this cycle, I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if we're still on our way down, if we're still in the peak, but I think eventually as the technology improves and as we start to dial in how we want to use it and how it's helpful and what we want to do with it, I think we'll start to figure it out and it'll start to show up at scale. Now, one more quick thought on all of this is that you have the normal hype cycle that I just described to you. Some people are saying that AI is going to have sort of a different shape because it's so immediately usable. You had people that were using early versions of Chat GPT to just like immediately apply to their work. So it's not like, oh, the technology comes out and then, oh, it's buggy and I can't use it. So maybe the trough isn't as deep because the technology comes out and is so capable immediately. But then again, you've got lots of people that hate the idea of it. So I don't know. Anyway, that's the Gartner hype cycle in a nutshell, and somewhat of my application to it in education.
And for the teachers who are in that kind of trough of despair, do you find, is the way out of that more personal use of AI or more professional use of AI? Is that a true wondering of mine?
No, that's a great question. I feel like I think either of them could work. I will just answer this in part by saying that whenever I do professional development about AI, I do mix in a healthy dose of just like fun questions or like easy to wrap your brain around things that aren't necessarily classroom application, because I feel like the more that you see the way that the tool works in a context that you're familiar with and comfortable with, it makes it easier to focus on the tool. So if I wanted to talk about the root causes of the Peloponnesian War, the history teachers would love that. The like chemistry teacher and the art teacher and the band director would probably hate it because they didn't have enough stuff to, they don't have enough knowledge about it to really work within that. But, if we talk about your favorite pizza toppings or something like that, and we use AI in that context, then they can really focus in on the tool. And so I think, to your question, I think if really whatever content makes us comfortable to use it so that we can actually examine the tool and not overthink the content, I think that's what helps us to start to see what it's really capable of. I hope that answered your question.
No, it does. And I still think I also lead trainings in schools, and I think that's always my biggest tension is like, how much time might we spend on just building that comfort? And also, how much time might we spend showing how it can level up your practice? Because it's one thing to read about project-based learning. It's another thing to talk with ChatGPT and design a project-based learning experience and compare that to your textbook and rubric and go, oh my gosh, it knows its stuff, right? So it's both and, I think, the play and the purposeful play towards problem solving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and that's just sort of the nature of good professional development, in my opinion, too, is that, if all you try to do is feed them steamed vegetables all day, no matter how much you like steamed vegetables, eventually you get tired of it. So you need a little bit of salt. You need a little bit of dessert. Actually, I think for every good professional development, there's a little bit of chocolate or something sweet involved in it that you can give teachers too. So I think you're right on that.
That's cool. Can I ask you a kind of intimate question?
Yes.
What is your LLM of choice?
That is an intimate question. I was like, what in the world is she about to ask me?
You jumped right into it, though. I really appreciate your confidence there.
Yeah. So, to me, I think the four most capable LLMs, but
Or
the four that I think are they're the ones that they call the frontier models, the ones that are, kind of on the bleeding edge are ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, Microsoft's Copilot, and Anthropic's Claude. And so like all four of those. I'm going to give you a cheating answer first, and then I'll try to give you a more not so cheating answer. My cheating answer is
explore all of them and see what results you get and what
kind
you
of my four. So my cheating answer is to use all four of them at the same time, which is a little different than what you just pitched to say, explore all of them and figure out which one you like. I'm like, I want to use all four of them at the same time. I'm going to take one prompt. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to throw it into ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, and Claude and see all of the results. I'm going to get all of the things. And then eventually, little by little, you start to see how they're different. And so then you can deploy them when you need to. So for instance, I'll kind of bounce back and forth between LLMs based on what I'm looking for. Like I have learned that Claude is the chatty LLM. Claude is the one that's like your friend that wants to show up at the coffee shop and sit down and talk about things. And so you ask Claude for something and it's the most verbose chatbot. But if I need to get down to the point and get something succinct, I'm going to use Microsoft Copilot because it seems to be the more like succinct, concise, let's get the work done and let's go type of LLM. But to be more specific to the actual question that you asked, the one that I seem to use the most is Google Gemini, because I feel like it's the sweet spot in the middle of the stuff that I want. I don't always necessarily need the big, long answer that Claude gives me, but I want some more details. And I feel like Gemini, for all of the teacher tasks that I do so regularly and some of the creative brainstorming and everything, Gemini just seems to hit the sweet spot where I want it to be in general. If it doesn't get the job done, I might jump off to another one, but of course, also I have the I have access to the advanced model of Gemini too. So I have a little smarter model that I can go to on that one. So that plays into it too, and honestly, for folks listening here, if your school is a Microsoft school and you've got access to the top levels of Copilot, then use Copilot. I think there's something to be said about finding which one you have the most advanced version of, and then maybe starting to use that a little bit more too. So I think there's a lot that goes into it.
Well, I've been like so biased towards GPT-4, if I'm honest. I haven't even really played with the other. I've played with them, but I've kind of always reverted back. But I was in San Francisco this weekend, and we're in late October of 2024. And San Francisco, we know, is a super modern city. And everyone there and everywhere I was looking, Gemini was definitely the tool of choice, and which mirrors what you said. So I'm kind of like, well, and it makes sense that it's a Google product, which I generally Google now. So, okay, Gemini. I think I played with it a little bit today, and so I think I got to level up my Gemini game.
Yeah.
Good to know. Might you speak? We've spoken a lot about the excitement and the cool things about GPT. Do you have any big fears? I know you're probably hearing big fears, and do you have any yourself that you think people should just kind of be aware of?
Yeah, lots of them, honestly. The other day I was doing a workshop with teachers, and I was talking to, I think she was an art teacher. And when I came in, I was just walking around, introducing myself to people, and she said, she basically told me that she was very concerned about AI. She was very worried about AI. And I said something that I think caught her off guard. I said, so am I. I really am too. And she's like, it's because, I think it's, let's go back to the fire metaphor that we were using earlier, right? fire can hurt people. Fire can burn everything to the ground if we're not careful. And there's lots of things that I have my eye on. For instance, I think you've got to be aware of accuracy, of course, when it comes to AI. And that doesn't just go for Chat GPT and the large language models. It goes for, image generators and video generators and the things that analyze our data and things that make suggestions for us. One of the places, when it comes to the data, one of the things that I'm really nervous about is how it takes existing amounts of data. Because what AI loves to do is to take data that it already has and make predictions about it and analyze it, right? Well, what if the existing data that we already have sort of like shines a light on things that we don't like about the world or things that are unfair in our life? So for instance, you've seen where like police forces, for example, will use crime data to figure out where they need to put extra patrols. Well, that's kind of like perpetuating a version of the world that we don't want. And, if you continue to funnel more and more cops in there, you start to have more interactions and it can all sort of fall apart really quickly.
Right.
I've seen also, when you talk about computer vision is where you take a live camera and AI is able to take that camera feed and identify things in it. And it's, what we use for facial recognition. If you go through the airport and it scans your face or, any of that biometric type of stuff. But we've also learned that computer vision models become less and less accurate the darker the skin color is. So, yeah, I know it's disappointing, isn't it? And so when you start
the bias you see, it's just exacerbated.
Yeah, exactly. And so, when you start to think about all of the places that could be put into place, for instance, even on school campuses, there's lots of places where we use surveillance cameras, and there's technology out there that will scan faces and will even allow the front office staff to flag certain faces as an alert. And so if it's doing that and yet it's inaccurate, and it's even more inaccurate the darker that the skin color gets, like what happens if it's inaccurate and it says that somebody is an alert and they call the cops and the cops show up with their guns out for somebody that isn't someone that was supposed to be an alert? There's like all of this stuff. Even when you talk about admissions too, all of that is based on a whole bunch of data that's aggregated together. And then you mentioned the word bias earlier. Whenever it starts to see predictors of who's likely to be successful in college, and you start to see some of those markers and everything, that doesn't take into consideration, some of the inequity and injustice that exists that holds some people back, and it starts to perpetuate some of those stereotypes. And so if some of those models are saying you should pick this person and this person and this person, but not this person and this person and this person, and it's all based on that stuff, we continue to perpetuate all of that same stuff. So I think I just like threw a ton of stuff. Sorry, you asked a big question. I gave you a big answer. But I think one of the big solutions to all of this is the human in the loop. That's a term that you hear in, like in computer science a lot, the human in the loop, so that we're not just turning things over to an AI model to figure out how I should make all of my decisions. We've got to still keep our human brain, our human eyes, and our human heart in the middle of all of this so that we still have, actual humanity involved in decision making, because otherwise we fall into those same biases that all the AI models are trained on. So those are some of the things. That's just believe it or not, that is a short list of things that I'm concerned about when it comes to AI.
So is that your biggest advice for school leaders then, though, is just to keep humanity and keep a human kind of stopgap in the loop there? Or are there other things that we should be mindful of or doing when we're considering bringing these AI tools into our schools?
I think that's definitely one of the big things is, I think that's one of the things that I worry about with schools is that, if teachers are strapped for time and they have too much stuff going on and everything, that they'll turn more and more of the decision making over to AI. Now, I will say, might ruffle somebody's feathers here when I say this, but AI and technology isn't the only thing that we've fallen into handing too much of the decision making over to, because you see some of those teachers that will run off to Teachers Pay Teachers and will buy a packet of worksheets and will just like mindlessly start handing those out to kids. And then all of a sudden there's no human decision making. You're just getting that all taken care of and everything. So yeah, I think to answer your question, I think one of the big things is to keep the human in the loop. Now, could we be advised by AI? Could AI kind of like poke holes in some of the things that we're doing, or ask us questions to make us think more broadly? Yes, I think absolutely it could help us to do that. But that human heart of looking at your students and going, who's at a big disadvantage, and who's sort of on the margins, and will the decisions that we make push them farther into the margins? These are the kinds of questions that we human educators, at least caring, thoughtful human educators, have been considering for the longest time. And I think if we continue to do that, I think that's definitely one safeguard that we can put in place.
Well, it harkens back to what you said earlier in the episode of just that the amount that's on a teacher's plate just seems to get to be more and more and more every year. And that's a beautiful thing because it's informed by research and data of what best practices are. Mm-hmm. So I think part of that challenge with AI is saying, what work is worth our cognitive load as teachers, and what might we offload, and what is that balance? What do we value, and how does this enable us to get more of what we value done while still maintaining the things that really matter to us and keeping that within our autonomy and within our grasp?
Yeah. You're using language that I find myself using more and more and more. You use that word matter. What matters? And how can we spend more time on the stuff that does matter? And how can we spend less time on the stuff that doesn't move the needle for students? When I talk about the time-saving benefits and the efficiency benefits of AI, that's one of the things I always go back to is, I think about what's the best use of a human teacher? You get to ask yourself that question, right? What is the best use of what makes me special? And how can I put more time into that and take time away from the things that don't do that? So for instance, if, I'm trying to think of, like rote, sort of like, not really rote, but like mindless grading of multiple choice quizzes. I'm just trying to come up with an example, right? Like sitting there and just mindlessly marking stuff that a computer could do. And it's not going to change, marking multiple choice quizzes isn't going to, if it was done by a human, the chance of it being done by a human making a big, big, big difference in a student's life is minuscule, Right. So if we can take that and take time away from that and add it to the ability to do the great stuff, sitting with a kid individually and talking through something with them, or talking to them about what they struggle with so that they can improve, or just being there as a human being, or whatever you deem to be the most important stuff in education. You're right. It's like, what matters, and how can we put more of our attention on what matters?
That's cool. Are you familiar with Pareto's principle?
Yeah, that's like the 80-20 principle, isn't it?
Totally.
Yes.
Right. So that's our challenge, is what is our 20%? What is the 20% of work that we do that yields 80% of the results? And now we have 10 hours more or 20 hours more to do that 20% work versus being bogged down by the other 80%.
Yeah. And I think the fact that you bring that up is important, because there's a question in what you were just talking about that I don't think enough people ask themselves and think about. And that question is, if AI saves me time, what will I do with that time?
Yes.
Right? Like, how will I actually improve my life, or, whatever. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm afraid that if AI does start to free us up and save us more time, that we'll take on more mindless tasks. I kind of feel like, if I look back to like when I was in elementary school, and, computers weren't really, we had a computer lab, but teachers didn't do anything with computers. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of sort of like, mindless paperwork and lots of things that aren't as efficient as they are today. And you look at a modern classroom, and some of that stuff has been streamlined. I mean, even communication by email, email communication sometimes is pointless and unnecessary and bogs us down. But in principle, it should be faster and easier. And yet we still feel just as overwhelmed and all consumed. Yeah, exactly. So are we replacing the tasks that are pointless with more tasks that are pointless, or are we replacing with stuff that actually makes a difference?
I hope not. I hope that there is a crisis of purpose and a crisis of time. Like, I think in the next 10 years, that is my hope, is that we have all extra time finally. Like what happened in COVID? We all were forced to stop and go, what am I doing?
Yes.
Right? So hopefully hopefully AI gives us that chance more frequently to stop and go, what am I actually doing? And does any of this even matter to me? Ooh, I hope.
Me too.
Any last pieces of advice you have for a school leader who's listening to this, maybe excited about AI, maybe in the trough of despair? What should they take back, and what would be helpful for them in their next steps?
Yeah. So I'm going to throw out another little principle that I learned from Ethan Mollick that I mentioned earlier. He says that for you to not fully understand, but for you to start to understand the capabilities of today's AI models, you need to spend 10 hours and 3 sleepless nights, which I thought was brilliant. The 10 hours part says that if you will sit with an AI model and you will ask it to do things for you on and off, on and off, on and off for a grand total of 10 hours, you start to get a pretty basic idea. Some people ask him, what is there a course I need to take? Is there a book I need to read? And he's like, nope, spend 10 hours. And then the other side of that is 3 sleepless nights, because he says once you've used it for 10 hours, you start to realize what it's capable of, and it makes you go, oh, wow. And it's a roller coaster. You go, oh, this is exciting. Look what it's able to do. And then the roller coaster comes down. And you go, oh, no, look what this is able to do. Oh, but it can do this. Oh, no, but it can do this. And you go up and down and up and down. And you start to extrapolate it out to the future. And you go, what's this going to do for jobs? What's this going to do to teaching? What is this going to do for humanity? And there's your first sleepless night. Hey. And then you think about it a little bit later, and then you have another one and another one. And he says, once you get through those 3 sleepless nights and those 10 hours, you're well on your way. So I think that's one thing I would lead them. And I think the other one is this: to always bring it back to the student, right? It's just sort of like that constant, it should be the constant thing that guides us in whatever we do. But I think we've always got to make sure that we're doing what's best for students, and not just what's best for them today in today's world, but we've got to prepare them for what's coming in the future. So I think we've got to take a real this is a time where we really probably should break everything down to the foundation, at least in conversation and in theory, right? And go, what do we build our foundation on? I think of it like building a house. You're going to pour the concrete foundation. Well, what is that concrete foundation that's going to support and hold up everything else? And is it something that's actually going to prepare students for this future that we're trying to envision? And at least having conversations about that, I think, helps us guide in the right direction, so we don't get stuck in status quo thinking of going, well, this is the way that we've always done it. This is the way that school looked for me. This is the way that school looks right now. So let's just keep doing it that way. That's a path to irrelevance pretty quick, I think. So I think we've got to have those conversations about, what do we build our foundation on? So those are a couple of things that I hope people take with them.
Woof. Yeah, really. What is worth learning now, and what is worth preserving? I think they're equally as important questions now. What is worth preserving and what is worth changing? And it's a deep tension, and it's one that it's not going away anytime soon. So it's worth wrestling with.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up. What's worth changing, but also what's worth preserving. Just because it doesn't have AI tied into it doesn't mean that it has to be thrown out. I think we look at things and we go, there are some things that, like, Socrates did all the way back then, that like still cause people to grow as human beings and to help them to think better. And so it doesn't mean that it has to be new, and it doesn't have to be tied to AI to be worth doing. So I think that's just as important a question is, like, just like you said, what do we preserve? What do we keep? What's important that is still preparing students for the world today, that would still prepare them for the world that they're going to see in their own future?
Well, and maybe AI can do it, but we choose to still do it ourselves because
Yeah.
that's worth preserving. Oh, I
Yeah,
love it.
exactly. Yes.
I adore it. Matt, such a cool conversation. Thank you so, so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.